Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at something pretty fascinating, I think, the world of fashion modeling.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to be doing that with Ashley Mears' book, The Price of Beauty, The Making of a Fashion Model.
Oh, great book. Yeah.
I'm so excited to unpack this with you. You're so good at, breaking down these complex systems and seeing things from such a unique perspective. I always learn so much from you.
I'm excited to talk about this one.
So yeah, let's dive into it. Get ready, listeners, because we're about to challenge your perceptions of beauty.
What's so interesting about this book, I think, is just how Mears kind of takes us beyond the runway and beyond the glossy magazines, and you really start to see the machinery behind it all. You know what I mean? Like, you get to see who's pulling the levers behind the curtain. I mean, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz in a way.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Okay,
Right.
so let's peek behind that curtain. Where do we even begin with this, all this machinery that you're talking about?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that, the modeling world is not just one big thing. There's actually two distinct tiers.
Okay.
We have commercial modeling and editorial model.
Okay, so commercial modeling, I mean, that's what we see day to day, right? Like
Yeah.
in catalogs and advertisements.
Yeah, exactly.
And then editorials more like the high fashion magazines and the runway shows and things like that.
Yeah, you got it. And here's where things get a little paradoxical, I think.
Okay.
Because you would think like commercial modeling is where the big bucks are,
Right.
but really it's editorial work that's seen as the key to making it, even though it often pays very little.
Really. Low wages, but high prestige. I don't understand. How does that work?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It all comes down to this concept called symbolic capital.
Okay.
So think of it like this. Okay. Imagine you're a young model.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've got a choice to make. You have a choice between a well-paying gig, okay, but it's for a brand that nobody has ever heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can choose a low-paying photo shoot for, say, Vogue magazine.
Okay, yeah. Now, if you choose Vogue, it might seem kind of counterintuitive,
Yeah.
financially, but it's actually like an investment.
Okay.
It's an investment in your symbolic capital because that Vogue shoot, that gives you prestige, that exposes you to all of these really influential people in the industry.
Right.
And it really opens doors for you to get even bigger and higher paying opportunities later on down the line.
I see. So it's like choosing the long game over the short game.
Exactly.
Like long-term influence over short-term financial gain.
Exactly. And this actually, I think, ties into how we value things in society.
Yeah.
Where prestige and exclusivity actually outweigh those immediate financial rewards.
Yeah.
It's about being part of a rarefied world. It's being seen in the right places with the right people.
Yeah, in the book, Mears actually talks about her own experience getting scouted. And get this, it was at a Starbucks.
Yeah, isn't that funny? At a Starbucks.
Of all places.
And that really highlights the industry's focus on look, I think, rather than conventional beauty. Okay, so not just being conventionally attractive, but having a certain something.
Yeah, look is this really elusive quality. And it's very manufactured. And it's not really about those traditional beauty standards.
Okay.
It's more about a vibe. It's about a presence. Like, think about all the terms that are used to describe models. You always hear words like edgy and chic and strong. And all of these qualities, they're so subjective. They're
Right.
constantly changing.
Depending on what's trendy at the moment.
Yeah, depending on what's trendy.
It seems like the industry can kind of like make or break someone based on these really arbitrary standards. I mean, if you don't have the look, then what?
Well, yeah, and what's considered in, one season could be totally out the next.
Right.
And it's this constant churn that really keeps the industry moving, and it keeps the models on their toes.
So if it's not about classic beauty, then what makes a look successful? I'm already starting to rethink what we consider beautiful.
Well, that's the power of the fashion industry. It can literally reshape our perceptions of beauty. And that brings us to the paradox of ugly pretty.
Ugly pretty. Tell me more.
Yeah, so high fashion actually often favors these unconventional looks,
Mhm.
even those that might be considered ugly by mainstream standards. Like, think about sharp angles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about unconventional features, like things that really challenge those typical notions of beauty.
So by moving away from mainstream beauty, they're actually reinforcing exclusivity.
Yeah, it's like a way of signifying an elite taste,
Okay.
and it's similar to the art world, I think.
How so?
Well, in the art world, these unconventional pieces can command really high prices
Yeah.
because they challenge our preconceptions about what art should be.
Yeah.
And it's all about cultural capital, It's about possessing the knowledge and the taste that kind of sets you apart.
It's like you have to know what to like almost.
Yes. You have to know what to like.
Right.
That's a great way to put it.
So the industry is always searching for that next big thing, that ugly pretty. That must put so much pressure on models to fit these ever-changing molds, to always be the next big thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. There's so much pressure to kind of conform.
Mm.
And,
Yeah.
it's not just about, striking a pose. You have to embody this whole persona that the industry wants at that moment.
Wow. So they're not just models, they're actors in a way.
Exactly.
It's like they're always on,
Right. Always on.
always
Yeah.
performing,
Mm-hmm.
and never really able to just be themselves.
Yeah. Mears talks about this thing called emotional labor.
Okay.
And this is where models really have to manage and present their emotions so strategically. So basically, they have to perform this certain persona as part of their work.
Wow.
So imagine having to be edgy and rebellious for one shoot, and then
Yeah.
the next shoot you have to be sweet and innocent. That takes a lot of energy.
It's like code switching almost.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's like extreme code switching.
It's interesting because I think we all do that to a certain extent. Like
Yeah.
you adjust your personality depending on who you're with
Yeah.
or the context of this situation.
Yes, we all do it to some extent.
But models take it to a whole other level.
Yeah, for them, it's their job.
Right.
It's their livelihood. And it makes you really wonder, how much of ourselves is truly authentic and how much is just performance?
Right. Wow. This is already blowing my mind.
Mm.
We're just kind of like scratching the surface.
I know.
I can't wait to hear more. Where do we go from here?
Well, let's keep going. Let's see what else we can uncover. And this whole idea of self-presentation and emotional labor, I think that really gets at the heart of the power dynamics in the industry. It's not just, about who is beautiful. It's about who has the power to actually decide what beauty is, who gets to say what's in and what's out.
So who are the power players in all of this? I mean, is it the models? Is it the agents? Or is it the clients?
That's a really good question. And I think, honestly, it's kind of a tangled web. You've got the models, obviously, who are just striving for success and recognition. And then you've got the agents who are trying to spot the next big star. And then, of course, you have the clients. So the designers, the photographers, the magazines. And they're the ones ultimately who are choosing who gets booked.
It's almost like everybody's trying to climb this ladder. But like the rules of the game are constantly changing and nobody really has the answers.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And remember that whole concept of symbolic capital.
Right.
That plays a huge role here in these power dynamics.
Okay, so remind me again. Symbolic capital.
Mm.
How does that actually work in practice?
Mm.
Like, how do models actually navigate this system?
Well, it's a constant hustle, let me tell you. Models are going to castings constantly. They're going to these go-sees. They're trying to catch the eye of agents and clients. And they're under immense pressure to adapt to these ever-changing demands of the industry. I mean, they have to manage their bodies, their emotions, their personalities, all to try to fit this, ideal look for each job.
It's like they're always on.
Yes, they are always on.
Like, always performing.
Always performing.
And never really getting a break. Like, never really getting to just be themselves.
Right, and that's really where that emotional labor comes in. Mears talks about how models they have to become so good at reading a room.
Yeah.
They need to be able to sense what a client wants and then shift their behavior accordingly.
So they're not just mannequins, they're like chameleons.
Exactly. They're constantly adapting. One minute they might have to be edgy and rebellious for an editorial shoot, and then the next they're all smiles and sunshine for a commercial campaign.
It must be so exhausting,
Mm.
to constantly be shifting your identity and like who you're presenting yourself to be.
Yeah, it takes a huge toll. And Mears talks about how this can even lead to a sense of, detachment from one's true self. It's like this fragmentation of your identity. They're never really able to just relax and be themselves, let their guard down.
That makes total sense. And it's not just the models who are feeling this pressure, right? I mean, even the agents and the clients. They're all kind of operating within this world of ambiguity.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a high-stakes game for everybody. The agents, they're constantly searching for the next big star, but it's like so hard to predict who that's going to be. Mears describes it as like more art than science. They're relying on their networks, their gut instincts, a lot of trial and error.
So it's not just about a model's looks. It's also about their personality, their
Yeah.
ability to, connect with people. It's like this it factor. That's what separates the stars from everybody else.
Yes, and that's the same for the clients too. The photographers, the designers, they're also trying to create those images and designs that are going to grab attention. They want to generate buzz and ultimately sell the products. And they're also looking for that it factor, that special something.
So when they're faced with so many talented models, how do they even begin to make a decision about who to work with?
Well, it's such a fascinating process. Mears explains that it's often based on a mix of things like, personal taste. What are the industry trends? And even things like social pressure, believe it or not.
Social pressure. What do you mean by that?
So the fashion industry, it's notoriously insular.
Yeah.
It's like this small world. And everyone knows everyone.
Oh, gosh.
There's a ton of gossip. There's a lot of jockeying for position. It's kind of like high school in a way, but with way more expensive clothes.
So, like, if one big photographer starts using a particular model, then other photographers might follow suit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a herd mentality almost.
So it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where the more a model is seen as, like, hot or in demand, the more likely they are to actually get booked for jobs.
Exactly. And it really speaks to how success in the fashion industry is socially constructed. It's not always a meritocracy.
Wow. This is really eye-opening. Like, there's this whole hidden system that's at play,
Yeah.
and most people have no idea.
Right, and that's what makes Mears' book so insightful. She doesn't just show us the glamour, she peels back those layers and exposes those inner workings, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. We've been talking a lot about the impact on the models and the industry itself, but I'm curious about the bigger picture. How does all of this actually affect society as a whole?
That's the million-dollar question. The fashion industry is this powerful force that shapes how we think about beauty, our spending habits, and even our sense of self-worth.
It's like that saying, clothes make the man or the woman.
Right, exactly. And it's not just about the clothes themselves, it's about what they represent. What messages are they sending about status, identity, belonging? And we see this everywhere. Like, think about the brands that we wear, the way that we decorate our homes. It's all connected.
So fashion, it's about more than just looking good. It's about sending signals, expressing ourselves, fitting in, or even standing out. But how does that tie back to the power dynamics that we were talking about before?
Yeah, I mean, think about it like this, we're seeing all these power dynamics playing out on this global stage, right? That they're shaping what we consider to be beautiful and desirable and aspirational. But the book also goes into some, kind of heavier social issues within the industry too.
Right, like racial inequality and the pressure on models to maintain these, like, really unrealistic body standards.
Exactly. And that's where things get, I think, really complex and thought-provoking. Mears doesn't shy away from those more, uncomfortable truths about the fashion industry and how it reflects and often even perpetuates these larger societal inequalities.
Like the industry's historical preference for white and thin models.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for decades, the runways and the magazines, they were dominated by a very narrow definition of beauty, tall, thin, white. And while things are starting to change, that legacy is still very much present today.
It does feel like progress is happening really slowly, though, especially when it comes to body image. I feel like you still see those incredibly thin models being held up as the ideal.
Yeah, and that sends such a powerful message to everybody, but especially young people who are, constantly bombarded with these images every single day. It's no wonder so many people struggle with body image issues when they're constantly comparing themselves to these unattainable standards.
And so frustrating because fashion has the potential to be so empowering.
Right?
To celebrate all these different types of beauty, challenge those norms.
Absolutely. And there are definitely designers and brands who are trying to do that.
Yeah.
But we still have such a long way to go. And one of the things that Mears highlights is the wage gap that still exists between female models and male models.
Really. So even though we see all of these, like, powerful women in the industry, like the designers and the photographers and the editors, there's still this underlying economic disparity.
Yeah, it's a classic example of how these inequalities persist, even in industries that are dominated by women.
Wow. It's like there's this disconnect between the image and the reality.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important, I think, to be critical consumers of fashion. Look beyond the glossy images. Ask those tough questions about, who is benefiting from all of this, who is being excluded, and what are the messages that are being sent.
This deep dive is really making me rethink my relationship with fashion. Like, I'm starting to see it less as this frivolous thing and more as this really powerful force. It shapes our values and our perceptions, even our sense of self-worth.
I think that's the power of, sociological analysis. It helps us see these everyday things, these things we take for granted in a totally new light. And it can really empower us to make more conscious choices about how we engage with these things.
So what can we do? Like, how do we navigate this really complex world of fashion without getting swept up in all the hype and the pressure?
Well, I think it starts with awareness. The more that we understand about these hidden systems, the power dynamics, the social pressure, the better equipped we are to resist those negative influences.
So being an informed consumer, questioning the images that we see and not just buying into all those unattainable ideals.
Exactly. And also recognizing that our worth doesn't come from the clothes that we wear or the brands that we buy.
Right.
It's about cultivating that sense of self-love and acceptance that comes from within.
It's about defining beauty and success on our own terms and not letting the industry do it for us.
Absolutely. And, the fashion industry, it's always evolving. What's in today might be out tomorrow. Trends come and go, but our values, our sense of self, those are the things that matter.
Well, this has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have learned so much about the fashion world and its impact on our culture.
I'm so glad. And I hope that this encourages you to keep asking those tough questions.
Yeah.
Keep challenging those assumptions and keep exploring those complex systems that shape our world.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us on this journey behind the scenes of the fashion industry. We hope this deep dive has sparked some critical thinking and maybe even inspired you to see the world a little bit differently. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.